Welcome. Take a moment to relax, make yourself comfortable. Tonight, you are about to hear one of the oldest and most famous stories ever told. A story that has traveled across deserts, crossed oceans, and survived for more than 1,000 years. It comes from the legendary collection known as 1001 Nights. And like all great stories, it begins with a secret. A secret powerful enough to change lives, destroy kingdoms, and transform a king forever.
This is the story of two brothers, two kings, two betrayals, and one extraordinary woman who chose to face death armed with nothing but her intelligence and her words. As you listen, try to follow the story in English. Don't worry if you don't understand every word. Just relax, listen carefully, and enjoy the journey.
Two kings, two kingdoms. Long ago, in the ancient kingdoms of the East, there lived a powerful ruler named King Shahryar. He was known throughout the land for his wisdom, strength, and fairness. His armies were strong, his people were prosperous, and everywhere he ruled, he was respected and admired. But Shahryar was not alone. He had a younger brother named Shah Zaman, who ruled the distant kingdom of Samarkand. As children, the two brothers had shared everything. They learned together, they trained together, they dreamed together. But when they became men, each inherited a kingdom and followed his own path. Years passed, then decades. For 20 long years, the brothers lived far apart. They ruled their kingdoms wisely, but they rarely saw one another. Until one morning, King Shahryar awoke with a feeling he had not experienced in a very long time. He missed his brother. The feeling grew stronger throughout the day, so he called for his most trusted advisor, the royal vizier. "Travel to Samarkand," the king said. "Find my brother and invite him to visit me. I wish to see him again." The vizier bowed respectfully. "I hear and I obey." And with that, the journey began. The vizier traveled across deserts and distant lands until he finally arrived in Samarkand. There, he delivered King Shahryar's message. The moment Shah Zaman heard his brother's invitation, he smiled. He had missed his brother too. Without delay, he began preparing for the journey. People were asleep. The palace guards recognized their king and allowed him to pass without question. Shah Zaman walked through the familiar corridors of his home, up the stairs, along the hallway, toward his private chambers. He opened the door, and in that instant, his entire world changed. There, in his own bedroom, in his own bed, was his wife. And she was not alone. For a moment, he could not move. He could not speak. The happiness he had felt only hours earlier vanished completely. His trust, his love, his memories, everything shattered before his eyes. The room seemed colder, the silence seemed heavier, and deep inside him something broke, a wound that would never fully heal. When the moment was over, Shah Zaman left the palace. He returned to his army. He gave the order to continue the journey. and before dawn, they were once again crossing the desert toward Shahryar's kingdom. But although his body traveled forward, his heart remained trapped in that terrible night.
Days later, he arrived at his brother's palace. King Shahryar welcomed him with celebration and joy. A great feast was prepared. Music filled the halls. The city welcomed its honored guest. But Shah Zaman could not share the happiness around him. His face had grown pale.
His eyes seemed distant, and a shadow followed him wherever he went. Shahryar noticed it immediately. At first, he believed the long journey had exhausted his brother, but as the days passed, the sadness remained. Finally, the king approached him. "Brother," he said gently, "something troubles you. I can see it in your face. Tell me what has happened." Shah Zaman lowered his eyes. Then he replied quietly, "I carry a wound inside me, a wound too painful to speak about." And for a little while longer, his secret remained hidden. Several days passed. King Shah Zaman remained a guest in his brother's palace. But although he was surrounded by luxury, comfort, and kindness, he could not escape the pain inside him. He spoke little. He smiled rarely. And most of the time, he preferred to be alone. One afternoon, King Shahryar announced a royal hunting expedition. The king's horses were prepared. The hunters gathered. The royal court made ready for the journey. As always, Shahryar invited his brother to join him, but Shah Zaman shook his head. "Forgive me, brother," he said. "I do not feel well enough to travel today." Shahryar was concerned, but he respected his brother's wishes. "Rest then," he said. "Perhaps the quiet will do you good." And with that, the king departed with his hunting party. Soon, the palace became unusually quiet. Shah Zaman wandered through the empty halls. The sounds of laughter and conversation had disappeared. Only silence remained. Eventually, he entered a large chamber and sat beside a window. The window overlooked a royal garden. It was a beautiful place. Tall trees swayed gently in the breeze. Fountains sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. Flowers of every color filled the air with fragrance. For a moment, the peaceful scene calmed his troubled mind. Then something caught his attention. A door at the far end of the garden slowly opened. Shah Zaman watched. First came several servants, then more attendants, and finally, the queen herself, King Shahryar's own wife. She was dressed in magnificent clothing and surrounded by her ladies-in-waiting. The group entered the garden laughing and talking among themselves. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but then Shah Zaman noticed something strange. Men began appearing from hidden corners of the garden. Men who clearly did not belong there. What happened next left him speechless. The queen greeted one of the men warmly, far too warmly. And around the garden, the servants followed her example. There was no attempt to hide, no sign of fear, no concern that anyone might discover them. The entire scene unfolded openly before his eyes. Shah Zaman stared through the window. At first, he felt shock, then disbelief, then something unexpected, relief. It was not because he enjoyed what he was seeing, far from it, but for the first time since discovering his own wife's betrayal, he realized he was not alone. His suffering was no longer unique. Even the great King Shahryar, the most powerful man he knew, had been deceived, and he did not even know it. Slowly, the crushing weight inside Shah Zaman began to ease. The knot of pain in his chest loosened. The darkness that had followed him for days seemed a little less heavy.
For the first time since leaving his kingdom, he felt able to breathe again. When the scene in the garden finally ended, Shah Zaman left the window. He returned to the dining hall. Food was brought before him, and for the first time in many days, he ate with appetite. That evening, King Shahryar returned from the hunt. The moment he saw his brother, he stopped. Something had changed. The sadness was still there, but it was no longer consuming him. There was color in his face again, life in his eyes. Shahryar sat beside him and smiled. "Brother," he said, "when I left this morning, you looked like a man carrying the weight of the world." He paused. "But now, you seem different. What happened while I was away?" Shah Zaman looked at him carefully for a long moment. He said nothing. Then he took a deep breath, and finally, he decided to tell his brother the truth. King Shahryar listened carefully as his brother spoke. Every word, every detail, every painful revelation. As Shah Zaman described what he had witnessed in the garden, the king's expression remained calm, too calm. His face revealed nothing, but behind his eyes, a storm was growing. When the story was finished, silence filled the room. For several moments, neither brother spoke. Then Shahryar slowly rose to his feet. "I believe that you saw something," he said quietly. "But what you describe is impossible." He turned away and walked toward the window. "My queen would never betray me." Shah Zaman understood. If someone had told him the same story only a few days earlier, he would not have believed it either. Some truths are too painful to accept without proof. So he said, "Then see it for yourself." Shahryar turned back toward his brother. "How?" "The same way I did." Shah Zaman explained his plan. "Announce another royal hunt. Leave the city as usual. Let everyone believe you are gone." He paused. "Then return secretly. Hide here beside this window. And wait." The king considered the idea carefully. At last, he nodded. "Very well. If the truth is what you claim," his voice became cold, "then I will know by tomorrow." The next morning, preparations began. Trumpets sounded throughout the city. Soldiers assembled. Horses were saddled. Servants packed supplies for the royal expedition. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Just another hunting trip. Just another day. By midday, the royal procession departed through the city gates. Thousands watched their king ride away. No one suspected anything. No one knew that this journey was only an illusion. Several miles from the city, Shahryar quietly separated from his hunting party. Disguised and alone, he turned his horse around. Then he rode back toward the palace, toward the truth. The king entered through a hidden passage known only to a few trusted servants. Without being seen, he climbed the familiar stairs, crossed the silent corridors, and finally arrived at his brother's chamber. The same room, the same window, the same view of the garden. There he waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. The garden remained peaceful and empty. For a moment, Shahryar almost laughed at himself. Perhaps it had all been a misunderstanding. Perhaps his brother's pain had clouded his judgment. Perhaps there was nothing to see at all. Then the garden door opened. The queen appeared, followed by her attendants, exactly as Shah Zaman had described. The king remained perfectly still, watching, waiting, hoping, praying. And then he saw everything. Every secret meeting, every stolen smile, every betrayal. Everything his brother had said was true. The world seemed to stop. The king felt the ground disappear beneath him. His heart pounded in his chest. His hands trembled. Not with anger, not yet, but with disbelief. For years, he had believed he controlled his kingdom, his palace, his destiny. Yet the greatest deception of all had taken place directly before his eyes, inside his own home. When the scene below finally ended, Shahryar stepped away from the window. His face had changed. The proud and confident king who had entered the room was gone. In his place stood a man whose understanding of the world had been shattered. He turned to his brother. For a long moment, neither man spoke. They did not need words. Both understood the same pain. Both carried the same wound. Finally, Shahryar broke the silence. If this can happen to a king, he looked toward the darkening sky. If this can happen to me, his voice faded. Then he spoke again. We must leave. Shah Zaman frowned. Leave? Yes. Shahryar nodded slowly. We will leave our kingdoms, our palaces, our crowns, everything.
He looked directly at his brother. We will travel the world, and we will discover whether there is anyone whose suffering is greater than ours. That very night, under the cover of darkness, the two brothers slipped through a secret gate in the palace wall. They left behind their armies, their titles, their wealth, their power, and together they disappeared into the unknown. The journey was about to begin, a journey that would change both of their lives forever. The two brothers traveled through the night. Far behind them, their kingdoms slept. Their palaces stood silent. Their people had no idea where their kings had gone. Neither brother spoke very much. Some wounds are too deep for words, and some questions can only be answered by time. So they walked through forests, across open plains, over rocky hills, day after day. Sometimes they followed dusty roads. Sometimes they crossed lands where no road existed at all. They met travelers, merchants, shepherds, fishermen, but nowhere did they find anyone whose story seemed more tragic than their own. Eventually, after many days of travel, they reached the edge of a vast ocean. The sea stretched endlessly before them, dark blue beneath the afternoon sky. The sound of the waves echoed across the shore. For the first time in many days, the brothers stopped to rest. Near the water stood a large tree. Its branches spread wide, offering shade from the sun. Beside it flowed a small spring of fresh water. The brothers drank deeply. Then they sat beneath the tree, listening to the rhythm of the sea. For a while, everything was peaceful. The wind moved gently through the leaves. The waves rolled quietly onto the sand. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed dangerous. Then the water began to change. At first, it was almost impossible to notice. A ripple, a movement, something stirring far beneath the surface. The brothers exchanged a glance. The sea was no longer calm. The water churned and swirled, as if something enormous were rising from the depths. Suddenly, a column of black smoke burst from the ocean. It rose higher and higher into the sky, twisting and turning like a living thing. The brothers leaped to their feet, their hearts pounding, their eyes fixed on the terrifying sight. The smoke continued to grow, upward, higher, until it seemed to touch the clouds themselves. Then, slowly, it began moving toward the shore, toward them. Neither king knew what they were seeing. Neither king wished to find out. Instinct took over. Without a word, they rushed toward the tree, climbing higher and higher into its branches, searching for safety among the leaves. Hidden above the ground, they watched and waited. The black smoke reached shore. Then something even stranger happened. It began to change shape. The swirling darkness condensed. A head emerged, then shoulders, arms, legs, a body. Within moments, the smoke had transformed into a gigantic figure, a being larger than any human, taller than a tower, stronger than any warrior. Its shoulders were broad as stone walls. Its chest looked as hard as a fortress gate. The brothers stared in disbelief, for they knew immediately what stood before them, a djinn, one of the ancient spirits spoken of in legends, a creature of immense power and immense danger. But that was not the strangest thing. Balanced easily upon the djinn's head was a massive chest, a chest secured with heavy chains and locked with 7 iron locks. The creature walked slowly beneath the tree. Each step shook the ground. Then it lowered the chest and placed it carefully upon the earth. The brothers held their breath, watching, waiting, wondering what could possibly be hidden inside. One by one, the djinn unlocked the 7 locks. One by one, it removed the heavy chains. The sound of metal echoed through the air. Then the lid creaked open. Inside the chest was a beautiful glass box, and inside the glass box was a woman. Neither king could believe what he was seeing, but the greatest surprise of all was yet to come. The 2 brothers remained hidden among the branches. Neither dared to move. Neither dared to speak. Below them stood the enormous djinn, and beside him rested the strange glass box. Slowly, the woman stepped out. For a moment, it seemed as if the world itself had become silent. Even the waves appeared to pause. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. She was extraordinarily beautiful, not simply because of her appearance, but because she carried herself with a calm confidence that immediately captured attention. There was something mysterious about her, something powerful, something impossible to explain. The djinn looked at her possessively, as though she were a treasure he had spent years protecting. Then he spoke. His voice was deep enough to shake the air around them. "My queen, my treasure, I took you on the night of your wedding. I hid you beneath the sea where no man could ever find you. And now, I shall sleep." With that, the giant lowered himself onto the ground. He rested his enormous head in the woman's lap. Within moments, his eyes closed, and the mighty djinn fell asleep. The brothers could hardly believe what they were witnessing. A creature powerful enough to terrify kings. A creature capable of crossing oceans and carrying mountains. Sleeping peacefully like a child. For several moments, nothing happened. The woman remained still, patient, silent, waiting. Then she slowly lifted her eyes and looked directly into the tree, straight at the 2 kings. The brothers froze. Their hearts nearly stopped. Surely she would scream. Surely she would call for help. Surely she would wake the djinn. But she did none of those things. Instead, she calmly raised one hand and motioned for them to come down. The brothers stared at her in disbelief. They shook their heads immediately. No, absolutely not. The sleeping creature below could destroy them with a single movement. The woman repeated the gesture, "Come down." Again, the brothers refused. Then her expression changed, only slightly, but enough. And she whispered words they could barely hear. "If you do not come down, I will wake him myself." The brothers looked at one another. They had no good choices. Stay in the tree and risk angering the woman, or climb down and risk the djinn. Reluctantly, they began descending, branch by branch, slowly, carefully, trying not to make the slightest sound. At last, they stood before her. The djinn still slept, his breathing deep and steady, his enormous chest rising and falling. The woman looked at them calmly. "Do not be afraid," she said. "He controls my body, but he does not control me." Then she reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out a small silk bag. The brothers watched curiously. The bag seemed ordinary, nothing special, nothing magical. But when she opened it, hundreds of rings spilled into her hand. Gold rings, silver rings, bronze rings, large rings, small rings, hundreds of them. The king stared, confused. The woman smiled slightly. "Every ring belongs to a different man." She let the words sink in. "Every one of them met me while the djinn slept." The brothers could hardly believe what they were hearing. This seemed impossible. The djinn was one of the most powerful beings imaginable. He had hidden her beneath the sea, protected her with chains, locked her away from the world. And yet, the woman looked directly into their eyes. He believed he could control everything. He believed he could own me completely. He believed that power was enough. She slowly closed her hand around the rings, but he was wrong. Then she spoke the words the brothers would never forget. No lock, no chain, no prison, no power, not even the power of a djinn, can truly control the human heart. The sea breeze moved softly through the branches above them. The waves rolled against the shore, and for several moments, nobody spoke. The brothers thought about their own pain, their own anger, their own betrayals, and slowly they began to understand something. Perhaps the suffering they carried was real, but perhaps the world was more complicated than they had imagined. At last, they bowed respectfully to the woman. She nodded in return. Then they turned and walked away from the shore, back toward their kingdoms, back toward their destinies. Neither brother realized it yet, but the choices they would make next would change countless lives forever. The two brothers eventually reached the place where their paths separated. For a moment, they stood together in silence. Each would return to his own kingdom. Each would carry the memories of everything they had seen. Shah Zaman returned to Samarkand. History tells us little about what happened after his return. Perhaps he found peace. Perhaps he did not. The old stories remain silent. The brothers went their separate ways, but King Shahryar carried something home with him, an idea that would soon transform his kingdom forever. And from that tragedy, a story told by a woman named Scheherazade would one day emerge. Our story continues in the next chapter.